Have you had a good week? uh, that's right. Oh man, it's always it's always up in the air, isn't it? Whether you have a good week or bad week, it's always dependent upon the next minute. Next minute. I was reading something this week, and it was talking about preachers, and it talked about how we're always on call, and we are, and that's fine. That's part of it, and we do it because we love it, or I guess we wouldn't do it. And so it goes from minute to minute. But life is like that. Nehemiah chapter 4 is where we're ready for this morning. It's a great chapter. I don't know that we'll finish it, but it's a great chapter, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. Do we have any announcements? I know Jim is preaching at Pasco today, and Haley won't be here. I wonder why. Yes, Missy has and if you want to see pictures, she has one or two. But they're cute. They're great. They're great. Anybody else? Miss Beverly passed away. We want to remember Donna and family in our prayers. She passed away yesterday, 3:30. Yeah, 3:30. So I saw her yesterday morning, and tough. And what else? Who else? Yes, the little baby that we announced passed away. Can you think of that family's name? Perry. But Perry's their name. Yeah. I noticed last night visitation is tomorrow at Concord, and funerals at Concord Road, Tuesday. I'd forgotten about that. I don't know them, but anything else? And remember, there is a memorial service tomorrow at 11 here from Miss Charlotte Aiken. Anything else? All right. Well, Nehemiah, the 4th chapter. Any good work that's seemingly worth its salt is going to run into some problems, some challenges, some difficulties. And that's true with the rebuilding of the walls around Jerusalem. You would think, oh, this is a tremendous work. Everybody would want to do it. Everybody would be involved with it, and everybody would be on board with it. But that's not the case. It seems like the devil is at ease when things are at ease, but when things get going, he gets going as well. And that's true here in this case. Nehemiah, as we know the story, but just kind of a brief overview to kind of catch us up. Nehemiah hears about the walls around Jerusalem that about, it wasn't 100 years ago, but years before had been destroyed. And he wants to go and he wants to help rebuild the walls. And so Nehemiah goes. He comes up with a plan. He presents that plan in chapter 2. Chapter 3, we saw a bunch of names is what we saw. But what we saw is folks that were willing to pitch in, folks that were willing to use their crafts, their talents, their abilities, and pitch in. And now in Nehemiah, the 4th chapter, we find something that is just hard to believe, and that is that there's some folks that are upset about it. Now, one of the things that we're going to note right here at the very beginning is this man by the name of Sanballat. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem are the leaders, if you will, of the opposition. And one of the things that you note about Sanballat is that really Sanballat lived several miles away. He was governor of Samaria, and he lived several miles away. Why did this bother him? We don't know. Why was he upset that Jerusalem was going to rebuild the walls? Was it that it posed a problem for him from the standpoint of power? Possibly. From the standpoint of Jerusalem was a weakened city and he wanted to keep it that way, possibly. We don't really know the reason, the motive, the background for Sanballat's opposition. But his opposition is such that, as we'll see, he tries to discourage the people. He talks about the materials. He ridicules the people, ridicules the what work they could do. And it reminds us, at least it reminds me, of having preached for 37 years. I've seen this. I've seen good projects in congregations get started, and there's somebody sometimes from the outside that doesn't know everything, isn't aware of everything, and they want to ridicule it. Back 30 years ago, somehow, and I do know how, but a man that preached in a congregation in the county got wind of a sermon that I preached. And so he wrote me a letter telling me how wrong I was. The sermon itself was a sermon on the Lord's Supper. And I made the statement that it would be good that sometimes, we're trying to focus our mind during the Lord's Supper, that use the seven-finger approach, and we think about one Lord and two thieves and three crosses, and I went through seven things, and I thought, I said, and this is actually an old preacher's thing. It's not something I came up with. This is something that many years ago, actually, they came up with in the early Restoration movements, and the early Restoration preachers did. And I said, but I had given people options. I said, if you want to focus your mind, pull the songbook out and look at a song that centers on the cross, or open your Bible to the events of the crucifixion of Christ and read that. And I talked about the seven finger thing. And this guy wrote me this letter about how I had gone off the deep end and how wrong it was, and that the Lord's Supper was all about centering our thoughts upon Christ and not the thieves on the cross. I wrote him a letter. I told him basically mind his own business. He didn't have the context of what I had said. He didn't have it all. He didn't have the whole story. The reality of it is that his sister was one of our members, and she told him what I said. I knew where it came from, and but because at that time we were not putting anything on the internet, we were not airing anything by virtue of radio or anything, so it had to come somewhere. But sometimes you get outside forces. Sometimes it's inside forces, and I can tell you stories. But let's deal with Nehemiah. Nehemiah faced opposition. Let's see what some of the opposition was. It so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the people. So this is a man that, as we said, he lived miles away. He was governor of Samaria. He hears about what is going to be done. He's upset. He's furious. Why? The text doesn't tell us. And we don't really know. Nowhere else in the Bible do we find, well, Sanballat was mad because of this. But he's angry. He's furious. He's indignant. And he begins to ridicule. He begins to mock the Jews. And he begins to mock the people of Jerusalem. And he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are buried?" You see, he calls, as it says, his brethren, which would probably be fellow Samaritans, and the army, which the Hebrew word literally means strength, but it can also, and is translated several times in the Bible, the army. And so he gathers his army, and look at his ridicule. He says, "Are these feeble Jews? What are these feeble Jews doing?" The word feeble is interesting. The Hebrew word means withered or miserable. What are these miserable, old, withered Jews doing? And then he asks, he says, "Will they fortify themselves?" It seems as if that may be the answer to why he did this. That all of a sudden Jerusalem was going to become a protected city. And becoming a protected city, Samaria seemingly had no insight or inroads or power over Jerusalem. But that's just a assumption. That's all that is. Will they offer sacrifices? Corey Roper, in his commentary on Nehemiah, says this is sarcasm at its greatest. Because what he's saying is, will they offer a sacrifice and God just rebuild the walls for them? The whole thought then, that is, he says, will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heap of the rubbish? Which tells us, first of all, how bad the walls were in disarray. And they had sat there for so long that, dirt and other things had come on them, let alone being destroyed when Babylon overtook Jerusalem. And so, Sanballat uses this sarcasm to really build up his people, but he's pushing down Jerusalem. Now, you might say, well, those folks in Jerusalem, they didn't know what he said to them. Well, there's probably a sister, a brother, somebody that got word to them, and so consequently they heard. But the mocking and the sarcasm are outside forces to try to stop something. He carries it further. There's a man now by the name of Tobiah, the Ammonite, was beside him and said, whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he'll break down their stone wall. That's almost a slam, if you will, between the material and not only the material, but the workers, right? If a fox goes up against it, if a fox brushes up against it, knock it down. They can't do anything. They're not able to do anything. But then, verse 4, there's a reaction. Who from? It's Nehemiah. What's Nehemiah's seemingly typical response whenever a problem arises in the book of Nehemiah? We've already seen it a couple of times. Praise about it. Yeah. Nehemiah's response when there's a difficult situation, difficult time. Okay, well, let's pray. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads and give them as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their iniquity. The idea of cover is do not forgive their iniquity. And do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. Does this sound like a Christian prayer? No. Lord, get them. Put them in a hole. Do something bad to them. Break their arms. Shut their mouths. This reminds us of what is called the imprecatory Psalms. You ever read some of the Psalms and you go, man, that's not Christian. They're awful. They're talking about their enemies and what they want done to them. And so when we look at that and think about that, that seems to run in opposition to what? How we're supposed to treat others, right? Kind. Be kind one to another. Tenderhearted. Love one another. Forgive one another. This seems to just run antithetical or opposite to anything that we talk about with regards to Christianity. And you might say, well, that was just the old way, that was the old law, that was the old way of doing things. But think about this. And there's really, seemingly, we don't have an answer for it. But think about this. Nehemiah didn't say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to show them. I'm going to fight them. And I'm going to make them wish that they had never said this. Nehemiah calls upon God. Finish this. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Deuteronomy 18. That's what Nehemiah does, isn't it? He gives the vengeance to God. God, you take care of it. You do it. That would be the way to handle it. Yes, I believe the way to handle it is to forgive them, to move on, let it go. We often say, forgive and forget. And one of the most difficult things that we have to do in our lives is forgive and forget. And we never really forget. The forgetting is the idea of letting go of it to the point of just saying, okay, it's not consuming me. I'm not trying to get vengeance, but it's not consuming me or my thoughts or my actions. I'm just going to move on best as possible. Which is really difficult. Moving on in life is really difficult. Moving forward, that's just through all. There's so many things in life. There's discouragement. There's worry. There's frustrations. There's problems. There's when people do things against us. In all of those scenarios, in all those cases, and so many more, the idea of just moving forward. And so it sounds like a good series of sermons. I have a file that I'm working on. Every time I find something that fits into one of those categories, I'm putting it in it. So we'll get that series here sometime, somehow. But Nehemiah prays, and I think that's what we should focus on. But we should also focus on the idea that he gives this to God. God, you take care of it. Anything else? Verse 6 kind of moves in just a tad bit different direction. Verse 6, they get halfway there. So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. So they got halfway there, but the answer was found, or the answer is found, in the last part of verse 6. How'd they get there? People had a mind to work. They didn't step back and say, maybe Sanballat and Tobiah were right. We can't do this. We can't finish. This is too big a job. This is too great a job. Our mamas and daddies and their mamas and daddies and their mamas and daddies and their mamas and daddies admittedly weren't here. But nobody has bothered to do this. This is too big a task. This is too much work. This is too hard. We've had to put our life on hold to do this. But that's not what they said. Remember in Nehemiah chapter 2 when Nehemiah said, here's the plan. The answer was what? Let us rise up and build. So here's the fact that they're following that plan. Let's rise up. Let's build. So they work. So they have a mind to work. They're halfway there. All right. Here comes some more outside forces. Verse 7. It happened, and catch what I'm going to add here. It happened when Sanballat, now Sanballat was north of Judah. Tobiah, the Arabs would be probably Geshem. This is south of Jerusalem. The Ammonites, east of Jerusalem. And the Ashdodites, this is west. This is a city actually in Philistia, which is west of the border of Jerusalem. So what do you have? Everybody around, right? Everybody around heard the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, and they became very angry. And all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. So now what's the threat? Yeah. Attack. War. That's here's how we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done from the outside. We've talked about you. Talking about you didn't stop you. Talking about you didn't make you change. Okay, so we're going to try something else. We're going to come at you. We're going to attack you. Well, let's see what happens with regards to that. So as they threaten attack, it says, excuse me, verse 9, nevertheless, we made our prayer to our God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. So we made our prayer. So you have the threat. You have the ridicule from the outside. You have folks conspiring. Isn't that interesting how folks conspire? These folks were not necessarily mortal enemies, but they weren't on the friendliest of terms, all of these nations around. And yet they're willing to unite to create a problem. That happens, doesn't it? The outside. Usually, though, the outside forces are not as difficult to overcome as the inside forces, right? It's the people within. It's the worm that eats the apple from the inside out that creates the problem. And so here, as they see the folks working, they see the gaps closing, they see all of this coming about. Nehemiah says, we made our prayer to God. But think about what they did. They made their prayer and they set their watch. You ever heard the expression, I know you have, watch and pray? And we sometimes think, oh, wait a minute, shouldn't we just pray? No. God does his part. We do our part, right? God says, bring it to me. He'll work it out. But we can't sit there and just say, well, God, you do it all, and I'll reap the benefits from it. Prayer always has God's side, God's part, our side, our part. And it's up to us. You know, a man can't say, I'm going to pray for a job and then not go look for a job. Man can't say, I want a house and pray for a house and then not go out and have the money in order to pay for a house, or even go out and look for a house that's for sale. It takes our part as well. These folks, they set a watch. So they don't. It's interesting because I even wrote, as I was studying this week, I wrote off to the side, when these folks conspired to attack the people, my question was it a bluff? In other words, were they just saying, were they really going to attack Jerusalem? Or was it just a bluff to get them to stop? Nehemiah considered it a threat, a pretty tough threat, right? Why? Because he said, we'll pray, but we're going to set a watch. We're going to make sure. Anything else? But now what sets in? You've worked for a little while. What sets in? You get tired, right? You get discouraged. You see that half of it's finished, but it's only half finished. We've been working for a while. It's hot. Labor is hard. Folks don't want us to fix it. The outside forces are pushing in on us. They're talking about us. They're threatening to come and create war against us, and we don't want that. That's not what we're about. You know, we're fine. And think about this too. They had been sitting there for quite a while. They were happy the way it was. Now all of a sudden Nehemiah's come and they're not as happy because they're not finished. We don't mind projects as long as what? We get finished with them quickly. Yesterday afternoon I was out pressure washing the the back of steps, the back paths, concrete paths. And I still have the little pad that we pull in on right in front of the garage doors to do. But anyway, I got there and I had been doing that, and I had done it for a couple of hours, and it was hot because, you know when I chose to do it? 12 o'clock. Really smart, you know. It's like 2, and I'm hot, I'm hungry, and I'm sweaty, and I stink, and it probably was good that you weren't home. I was still stinking when I came over there. but I said, I've had enough. You know, I got a little bit more to do. It won't take long, but I'll do it some other day. I'm almost done, but not quite. That's where these folks were. We're almost done, but not quite. And so, what happens next? Well, let's look. Verse 10. Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing. There's so much rubbish that we're not able to build the wall. Fatigue is set in, discouragement is set in. That happens to all of us. When we're children of God, we get discouraged. Why? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. Things going on in church, you know, the elders are doing this or they're doing that, and I don't like this. The preacher's preaching this or preaching that, or he's on this series, or, you know, he does this away, and I'm just tired of it, and, you know, we just can't. I have tried to get folks to come to church. I've tried to get my family to come to church. I've tried to get my friends to come to church. I've tried to get my neighbors to come to church. It's just, you know, they won't come. Satan just keeps pounding at my door, and he just keeps tempting me and putting temptation before me. And this Christian life's hard. I'm just worn out. I'm tired. I'm discouraged. I'm frustrated. That happens. And that's all right that it happens. It's not that it happens that's the problem. It's what? It's how you handle it, right? And so it's all right that these people were discouraged, but they have to figure out some way to move forward. Our adversaries said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. It seems as if their problem not only is discouragement, but they're a little bit afraid. But who wouldn't be? Right? Who wouldn't be? Yeah, we're going to come beat you up. No, kill you. That is a question with regards to verse 10 and verse 11. You know, even that. And so that's a great point. Yeah. No. Yeah. That's very true. That's true. That's true. Very true. Yeah, we make it up. And do you know, if once you make it up in your mind, you're convinced that it happened whether it did or didn't, right? And they said it whether they did or didn't. I've been told before, not here, it's coming, I'm sure. You said so and so. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. And back many years ago, somebody accused me of saying something, and I told them, I said, if I said it, I sure didn't mean it, because I don't even believe that. So I went back and listened. That congregation, at that time, we were using, you remember the old cassette tapes? And I about wore out cassette tape listening to that sermon, and I never did say it. But they were convinced that I said it, and there was nothing I could do. Matter of fact, I even produced the tape, and I said, if you'll listen to the tape, and I'll listen to it with you, we'll find out together. I didn't say, I'm not listening to that. Now we got the problem. The problem is me and not what I said. You're upset at me for something. But yeah, we do. We make it up. And so, yeah, did it really happen? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. How are you going to get the material? Of course, Nehemiah had made arrangements for Asaph, for the wood, and others through the king, but and that was seemingly, as we look at the 4th chapter a little bit further on, that was what they were using. They were using a lot of what was there, to piece it together. And so, yeah. But you also got to remember, at least in my thinking, and I may be completely wrong because I have not seen collaboration to this because I don't think there is any. But not only the stones for when the walls were destroyed when Babylon came in, but you also have the fact that you've had years of just, wind blows dirt and debris, things build up. So you have all that. So yeah, the rubbish is just the big stones, the little stones, and what's blown in, and not just blown in, but what's brought in. You ever had things in your yard that you think this is nowhere to be found, but probably a bird or a squirrel or something brought it? I had a man, I still have it. It's in my office on one of the shelves. I had a man that brought me a golf ball. He says nobody around plays golf, but it was in my yard the other day. And, animals take things around. They pick up things they think are something, then they find out they're not, and they drop it. And those things happen. You do. Yeah. Yeah, things get around, and they sure do. Yeah. Anything else? Well, here we have something we've already had. We have more negativism. Look in verse 12. So it was when Jews who dwelt near them came, they told us 10 times, from whatever place you turn, they will be upon us. 10 times. Why 10? I don't know. I think Nehemiah is just trying to say, they kept saying this to us. They just kept repeating this. It doesn't matter where you turn, we're going to be upon you. We're going to take care of you. We're going to straighten this out. I think what the fascinating part is that I'm not spoiling because I know you've studied Nehemiah before. So I'm not spoiling the end for you. But in 52 days, they rebuild this wall. This is a magnificent, tremendous feat. And part of it is the fact that maybe they finished it in such time that these folks couldn't organize and come against them. But who knows? Therefore, verse 13, I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall, the openings, and I set the people according to their families with their swords, their spears, their bows. So he set a watch. He organized. He set families together. That's a good idea. It really is. Families have a tremendous way of doing what? Sticking together, first of all, because blood's thicker than water. They also have another fascinating way. You ever notice this? Families have a fascinating way of fighting, but when they fight, they usually get over it very quickly. Not always, but usually. And so these families, he set them down by families, gave them swords. They had spears, they had bows. And verse 14, and I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Remember. There's two categories, if you will, of who they're to remember, who they're to fight for. Who are they? God's one. What's the other? Everybody else, right? Your families, your friends, the folks that are around you. So the battle, Nehemiah is saying, is not just for God. The battle is also for everybody else. You're not just fighting for yourself or for God, but you're fighting for the people. Go ahead. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly right. That let's equate that with the church today. And that's the way we should be. We are brethren, we are family. And we should, by all means, we should be willing to stick together, band together. We may not always agree. We may not always see eye to eye. We may not always, as the old saying goes, we may not see the same way to skin the cat. But at the same point in time, too, we're family. We're family that can air its grievances. But at the same time, we're family that, while we see each other's flaws, we're willing to stick together when forces from the outside attack. Now, what about when forces from the inside attack? Well, we're still family. But the problem now is outside. So, yes, we should still be like that. Anything else? Doesn't this, though, in some ways throw a cog in the way of thinking? We had what we called, at least similar to the imprecatory Psalms, this idea, this prayer, God, go get them. But now we're setting a watch. We're fighting back. How scriptural is that? Doesn't seem right, does it? But at the same time, too, if you don't stand up for yourself at least a little bit along the way, you get run over, right? I'm not advocating violence or fighting back, but sometimes you gotta take a stand, and that's really what they've done. They've taken a stand, and they're just protecting what's theirs. They're not going out and creating the disturbance, but they're making sure that what they have is all right. Verse 15, and it happened that when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, everyone to his work. So in other words, they'd become exposed. Whether it was a ploy or not, whether it was something that they just come up with, we're just going to attack you. We'll be where, we saw verse 12, we're going to be wherever you are, we're going to be upon you. They kept saying this. When Nehemiah made a plan, worked the plan, protection, they backed down. Okay. They knew that God had brought their plan to nothing. We went back to work. It's interesting. Look at the words, all of us returned the wall. It seems as if there might have been a delay, a little time period where, simply put, they suspended their work. How long? Don't know, but there was a little time where maybe they weren't working. So now we can return to work. Everything's known, everything's seen. We'll get back to work. So it was, verse 16. From that time on, that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and wore armor, and leaders were behind all the house of Judah. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked at construction and with the other held a weapon. Every one of the builders had his sword girded at his side as he built. The one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. So you have everybody working. You have folks that, first of all, are setting watch. You have, second of all, and some folks are working. You have some folks that are working with one hand and seemingly have a weapon in the other. Some that are simply ready with their weapons. So what they have is a fortified situation. But they're working. They keep their eye on what their goal is. They keep their eye on what their work is, but knowing that there are outside forces that they need to be aware of. Then I said to the nobles, verse 19, the rulers and the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we're separated far from one another on the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. There's two things I want you to see in these verses. There's, first of all, the idea that they said we're far apart. You see, even though they were working at different places around the wall, they probably started out closer together, right? Why? Because, well, you start and go this way, and you start and go this way. They were close. But as they built, they were getting further apart. Of course, you could say, well, they were, getting closer to the other. Well, they were getting spread out. Sort of like the guy that was, his job was to paint a line down the middle of the road. And the first day he painted a line down the middle of the road, and he painted 5 miles. Boy, his boss said, that was great. And the next day he came back and he'd painted 2.5 miles. And the boss said, well, that's good, but that's not what you did the first day. And then the next day he painted a 1/2 mile. And so the boss wanted to know, he says, what in the world? Since you're getting less and less each day, he says, it's getting further and further back to the paint bucket. Anyway, has nothing to do with anything. But the second thing I want you to notice is verse 19 and 20 are words of encouragement. Words of encouragement from Nehemiah. Okay. Leaders do not become silent when there's problems. We like to think, well, we'll do the old ostrich thing. We'll stick our head in the bucket. We'll stick our head in the sand, and it'll all go away. And it doesn't. And so Nehemiah responds by saying, okay, let's get together and let's talk about this and let's see what we need to do. So, verse 21, he says, we labored in the work, and half of the men held spears from daylight or daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time, I also said to the people, let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem, that they may be our guard by night and a working party by day. So he sort of doubled down. We're going to have guards all the time. We're going to work during the day, but we're going to have guards all the time. So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. I'm glad he said that, aren't you? I was getting worried. Everybody took off their clothes in order to wash them. Nehemiah organized the workers. He organized the guards. He encouraged them. He trusted in God. He really set the right kind of example. Anything else? I want us to always come up with lessons learned, but anything anybody wants to talk about or add? It's believed that they use like a mortar mix to kind of keep it all together. It was more of a mud than a mortar. Thinking, go to Lowe's, go to Home Depot, buy a mortar. I do. I'm sorry. I do. I think of it that way. But it's more of a mud situation. It's a great question. Anything else? Well, what are some lessons that we can learn? I have 12 down here. We won't cover all those thinkings, right? We'll cover 2 or 3. It's getting about time. First of all, I think it's good that goals are set. They allow us to make plans and move forward. Nehemiah made some goals. I am a goal-oriented person. I am a daily goal-oriented person. I am a weekly goal-oriented person. I am a monthly goal-oriented person, and I am a yearly goal-oriented person. I am not one of those, however, that when my goals don't get met for whatever reason, that I just beat myself up. I'm not like that. But I have a plan. And then, matter of fact, if you go in my office right now, and my laptop's at the house, but where it sits, beside it, there is a Post-it note. And that note will tell you what are some of the things I have to accomplish next week in my mind, beyond just get up, 2 lessons, 2 Bible lessons, 2 sermons. Here's some other things. Here's some cards I want to send, some calls I want to make, some folks I want to see or at least talk to from that standpoint. Here's something maybe the elders want me to do or whatever it is that needs to be done. And It's not everything I'm going to do, but that's the week. I'll wake up in the morning, and as I'm getting ready, I'll go over in my head, okay, here's what I want to accomplish today. You probably do the same thing. And but I think goals are important. Now, some folks say, my goal is to do nothing. Well, that's your goal. That's all right. That's your goal. I always get people, talk about New Year's resolutions, and some folks will come up to me and say, I don't make New Year's resolutions. I said, did you resolve to do that? And then they think and they walk away. Smart aleck preacher. Goals are good, and Nehemiah made some goals. Let's get a couple more of these in right here. Preparation and analysis are important. I was thinking about that, and if you stop and think about this, Jesus for 30 years before he started his ministry did what? He was preparing. Do you know how many years it was before Moses led the children? How old Moses was when he started? 80 years old. Took 80 years of preparation. How many years of preparation did the apostles have? 3, right? Jesus has public ministry for 3 years. Preparation's all right, as long as you know where you're headed and why you want to get there. And then you analyze, of course, as you're moving forth. Turn to God in the midst of outside interference or inside interference, for that matter. Nehemiah prayed to God. Constant vigilance is needed. We always need to be on guard. Satan is always around. He's always our opposition, and we're always having to face him. And so we need to be sure that we are constantly on alert. Anything else? Well, I've got some more, but that's enough. We will look at the 5th chapter next week, more problems. It's going to get good. I mean, there's going to be a positive end to all this. The walls are going to get rebuilt. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are so thankful for this day. We're thankful for the beautiful sunshine. We're thankful for the health and strength that we've had to come out this morning to be able to study a portion of your word, to look and see Nehemiah rebuilding the walls and how they went about doing it, and the obstacles that they faced, reminding us really that we face obstacles in living our Christian life and doing the things that you have told us to do. But mindful as well that we can overcome those things if we will simply set a plan in action and do that plan. We ask that we'll always live with you and for you, and we'll always turn to you for guidance and for strength and for comfort. Watch over us now, bless us and keep us. Forgive us of our sins, for this is our prayer in Christ's name. Have a great week. Thank y'all.